Yeah, boy, it's April 21st, and it's episode 106, and this is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your host, Uncle Buckets. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on facebook.com /fantasy football auctioneer, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight we're going to take a look at the wide receiver position, looking at moves, signings, trades, and tonight we have Mr. Reception Perception himself, Matt Harmon, with us. So before we get to his official intro, let's talk to our experts because they're always here. He's still reeling over the huge fantasy hockey auction bidding war over Ben Bishop of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Blister, thanks for the draft last week. I had a blast, and I'm happy Detroit pumped old Ben Bishop tonight.
Yeah, that was. I was pretty certain that the way my team was shaping up, I needed to have him, but in the end, it was just too much. So yeah, Benny Bishop has 2 losses already on the year. I thought I thought Tampa deserved a better fate tonight. They didn't play that bad. Hit a lot of posts, but. Detroit's a savvy old veteran team, so it's going to be a tough series. I think Tampa will come back with the next game, and it'll probably go to 7, I'm thinking. But hopefully, I need the Lightning to do well, so hopefully Bex, me and you in another week are still talking.
Okay. Well, at least he's doing. Ben Bishop's doing better than my goalie is. He's riding the bench, so I don't know if you score points for slivers in the R's, but
yeah,
you do. No. I'd be getting them.
It's tough to score for
I'm so happy he's not my secret pick now. So, yeah. Anyways. All right. And he's taking a stand against microbrews. At least that's what he did on Twitter. He's supporting Labatt Blue. Slim, you got one in you tonight?
2, as a matter of fact. But it wasn't a stand against microbrews. I got nothing against them. It just seems like that's all everyone, at least that I follow, it's sports or what microbrew they're drinking on the weekend. And yeah, I just had to go against the grain there and keep it real, I guess you could say.
Goose Island I have tonight. This is a red ale, a bold ale with a mix of herbal and woody and citrus aromas from Mount Hood and the Amarillo hops. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I've never even had it before.
You're a pretentious bastard.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of how I am. I don't know. I'll drink the beer hot, cold, light, not light. Doesn't matter. It's like coffee. It all goes down the same. All right. So let's just keep rolling because we have a special guest on tonight. Tonight, our special guest will help us to discuss the wide receiver position. He's from thebackyardbanter.com. Mr. Reception Perception, Matt Harmon. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, fellas. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to talk about wide receivers and everything that's been going on in the NFL lately with y'all.
Yeah, there's been a lot of movements, so we're excited to have you on. Matt, before we get started, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in some fantasy football, and have you ever played auction before?
Yeah, actually, I did a couple auction drafts last year for the first time, and I mean, it was addicting. It's such a, it gives you so much more control and so much more, like you really have to kind of put your money where your mouth is, literally, with the auction draft, as opposed to the snake draft where everything's just kind of predictable and it goes down the line and comes back around. With an auction, yeah, you actually get to have a little strategy too, like try to play games with the people in your league, especially if you know them and you know they value certain players. You can toss them out there. Yeah, I like auction drafts a lot. But
awesome.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying that because you guys are an auction team.
Well, sure.
Of course not.
Right. But yeah, so a little bit about myself. I write for Backyard Banter. That's my site. Started there a couple of years ago, and I also write for footballguys.com and the Washington Post, where I do a couple of these reception perception articles. And so basically what reception perception is a methodology that I developed to evaluate the wide receiver position. I pretty much set out to try to cover football, full time, and still working on that, obviously, but set out to really put a lot of effort into it a couple of years, just about a year and a half ago, and a few months into it, I started kind of developing this methodology and kind of putting it through some tests and everything, and then last summer I unveiled it to a few articles on my site, and then I started running kind of a one-game series at Football Guys, and now I'm knee-deep in charting pretty much every relevant NFL wide receiver, some of the guys that we're going to talk about tonight, as well as a few draft prospects. So really what I'm doing right now is kind of collecting context and putting hard numbers to these wide receivers, like what they do on the field.
And this is one of the reasons why I love fantasy football. I mean, the fact that we can be so degenerate that you got a guy charting all of the routes and versus coverages and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's awesome. What other hobby has someone who's just so specialized into that one little niche? I love it. And hey, I mean, spreading yourself into different areas, you kind of have to have your little niche, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We try to do auctions, our niche. So we're happy to have the wide receiver expert on tonight.
You bet. Guru.
Guru.
Well, I'm doing what I can.
That's good. Well, I love it. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about some of these wide receivers we got tonight. So why don't we get into it, guys? If you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. So, folks, like I said before, we got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we got special guest Matt Harmon looking at wide receivers, the moves, the signings, and so much more. So let's just get right into it. Guys, I'm in no particular order. Let's just start right off the hop with Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb, he re-signed with the Packers for a 4-year, $40 million deal. Matt, I know that on your website you've broken down some of Randall's metrics. Talk to us about Cobb and what you see out of him as a receiver.
Yeah, it was funny when I first started. I actually just started writing for the Washington Post, a couple months ago, and this was the first article they wanted me to put up there was about Randall Cobb, and I really expected him to leave Green Bay, but then when he stayed, I mean, looking at his numbers, it really was the best decision possible for him. Not just because he's in a great offensive system with a great quarterback, but so much of what he does on the field is very specialized to a precise quarterback who reads the defense well and gets the ball out with timing, and Aaron Rodgers is the best in the business at that.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as his success rate versus coverage, which is the main metric of reception perception, is basically just how often are they getting open on each particular route and against each particular coverage. He was above average in all 4 measurements of it, which is he was above average against man coverage, above average versus zone coverage, and double coverage and press coverage. So, I mean, he's a good receiver, obviously.
Yeah.
I think some of the talk that he would have gone to another team and completely faded away was a little overblown. And I was a little surprised after charting him that he did grade out so well for me. I expected him to be kind of more of a product of his system. But as an individual player, he's a strong guy. However, a lot of his routes are about 17.1% of the routes he ran over the 8-game sample that I took were flat routes. 30, and then 13.1% were slant routes. So again, he's really an underneath guy, and those are real timing-based routes, and he's good on them. He produces and he gets open. However, you have to wonder if he had gone to Oakland or something like that, would he have been able to produce the same amount of fantasy points? But luckily, he's staying in Green Bay, and I think that, so I mean, we don't have to worry about that.
No.
And, I mean, he's definitely more of a complete receiver. He's not a gadget guy. I charted him having really good success on his deep routes as well. I mean, he's a guy who can get vertical on defenses too. So that was one thing that surprised me the most after charting him, was that he is such a well-rounded player. However, he's obviously staying in the best spot for his statistical success to continue.
For sure. Hey, Blister, I was just checking out the stats over at thefantasyfootballauction.com, checking out your rankings. You've got them slotted right now at number 10 overall. Talk to us about, kind of why you have them in there at that $40 range. I guess tearing up with Emmanuel Sanders, T.Y., Golden Tate, that type of a tier.
Yeah, I think when looking at this, of course, I just opened this up again before we went on air, and I thought, looking at him, I mean, he finished 8th overall last year in PPR, and for the most part, I think he could sneak back in there. I mean, Calvin is fading. Can Calvin bounce back? If not, I think he could move up one on him. And then with, Alshon and AJ, he could definitely beat out one of those two guys to move up another spot. I don't really see him being in that same tier as Emmanuel and Ty. I do think he's a lot better than that. But I think at the time, I did have him a little bit lower when I first did my ranks because we didn't know where he was going to sign. Once he signed, I moved him up some, and that can still move up a bit more before the year goes on. But, I do see him as definitely a top 10, a shoe-in as a top 10, and potentially moving into 7, 8. With Jordy Nelson still around, it's a great 1-2 punch. It was a great move for him staying there, obviously, with a great quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. But you still, each of them can help each other, but then again, each of them will draw targets from each other potentially. So I have him, a top 10. I don't, like I say, probably move him up a couple spots, but I don't know if I can put him any higher than some of the guys ahead of him.
All right, so Slim, what do you think about having him in there with that in that tier right now? If I'm looking at Blister's hypothetical auction numbers right now, because we haven't really been able to get into mocks, he's got him in with Emmanuel Sanders, Ty, Golden Tate. They're all kind of hovering around that $38, $39 mark.
Well, I don't know. I think he's a little bit higher than those guys personally. I think to me he slots in kind of right around, like Blister said, he gets into that AJ Green, even closer to where Jordy finished, kind of tier range. So to me, he's kind of that low end wide receiver one. I think last year I think he said he finished 8th in PPR points. To me, that's a realistic place for him to finish again this year. I have a hard time seeing him scoring less than 10 touchdowns. Just because, like Matt said, he's a good red zone target because he's used, on those quick timing routes is where he excels, and that's kind of what Green Bay likes to use when they start getting closer to the goal line. So I expect him to get double-digit touchdowns again, and I think he's capped a little bit yardage-wise because of Jordy being there, but I don't think it's a stretch for him to finish with 13, close to 1,400 receiving yards, kind of similar to what he did last year. So to me, it's kind of the status quo, and then like Matt said, it was a good thing he signed there. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers doesn't hurt, but
For sure.
they know how to use him, and he's had success there, and I don't see how he doesn't do that, barring injury again this year.
All right. Hey, Matt, just as I'm going through this, I'm thinking to myself, here's a guy that really studies the wide receiver position. What's your strategy when it comes to wide receivers? Is it because you know them so well that, excuse me, that you can sit back and kind of get some of those lower tier guys because you understand where kind of they slot and chart and what their upside can be, or do you just target those wide receiver ones heavy in your drafts?
Last year I was really wide receiver heavy, and I think this year I'm actually going to reverse course, and since I'm going to have so much data on these wide receivers this year, last year I just basically had a really small sample sizes on some of these guys.
Right.
So this year I'm looking definitely, like you said, to pull back and maybe get some of these later round guys. And the good thing about reception perception, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to do it anyways. The good thing about it is that it breaks down every part of a wide receiver's game. How well they separate, also how there's a contested catch conversion rate, a tackle breaking metric. I mean, so the system and the methodology just gives you literally a quantifiable data point to everything that they do. So I think that allows you to not only understand what they do, but also how well they fit with their quarterback. Like I said, with Cobb, with those timing routes and everything, he's a great fit for a precise quarterback like Rodgers. So for a lesser example, and I'm sure we'll talk about a few tonight, you can look at how well they fit with the quarterback, and that leads to more statistical success because the wide receivers are such a dependent position. So I'm definitely going to be playing, and especially because running backs are so scarce, like those top 5 guys are really invaluable. They can really carry your season. That I'm going to probably try to take my stabs at running back early and then pull back and look at values receiver later.
Well, and for people out there who haven't checked out his stuff, thebackyardbanter.com, check out his charts. It is awesome to see. Just he's got every stat you could imagine on these guys, and it's really an eye-opener actually, because you think what you see with your eye is one thing, and then what the numbers actually tell you is a whole different thing. So it's it's a real interesting look. But I just then all of a sudden I was like, oh, he just segued. I should have just jumped with him when he said take a look at some other lesser guys with different quarterbacks. And let's move into Percy Harvin, who's a lesser guy with a different quarterback. Matt, Percy moved to Buffalo. He's got kind of like that 1-year prove-it deal in Buffalo. Following Rex Ryan there, talk to us about what you see out of Percy Harvin.
Yeah, the funny part about Percy's season last year was obviously because he was traded mid-year. It really did become kind of a tale of two seasons. Like when he was in Seattle, he was pretty strictly like a slot, a gadget wide receiver type of guy. And when he signed with Buffalo, what he said was, "I want a chance to prove that I'm a complete receiver." And he really did kind of get that chance with the Jets last year. His snaps outside. Really, they more than doubled when he was with the Jets. He played a lot of flanker as opposed to a slot or a guy out of the backfield. But however, the results were still pretty inconsistent. His success rate versus man coverage and zone coverage were both below average, and he's running pretty easy routes. I mean, the vast majority of his routes are in-breaking routes and short routes, and he still wasn't super successful. I mean, he obviously can make some plays after the catch, but he wasn't like one of the best guys I charted there. He's not great in traffic, so I mean, I think he's a limited player. While he can have some value as a flanker, and I do think that I've started, especially charting these guys, I've really started to think that I'm kind of over the gadget role where you see guys like Cordero Patterson or Tavon Austin are kind of not succeeding in that role. And I think Percy Harvin probably is better suited just to move on from that phase of his career. Even though they make exciting highlights there, as a down-to-down contributor, I think it's better off just play him outside or play him in a slot sort of role. So I think Percy can have some success, but the problem is where the target's going to be in Buffalo. I mean, they've actually got a lot of interesting, other than quarterback, they've got a lot of interesting offensive pieces. They've got Sammy Watkins coming, looking to improve on his rookie year. They've got Robert Woods as a pretty solid player. They added a tight end. They added Shady McCoy in the backfield. That's a lot of mouths to feed there right now, and I just don't think Percy is going to be a priority. And also, I think he's kind of a declining player, not only physically, but as a technician, he's still. I mean, you look at some of his releases from the line of scrimmage; they're still just really, really bad. He takes this really frustrating thing that receivers do is they'll hop off the line as opposed to like cut into a quick break to get off press coverage. And it's something that NFL cornerbacks just feast over, and you see it time and time again with guys like Harvin who are really raw technicians. They default on bad habits like that. So I'm not very excited about Watkins, and I mean I'm not very excited about Harvin.
Watkins probably a different beast. Hey, Blister, I'm taking a look over at the rankings like I always do. You have Percy way down as receiver 68 right now, a $3 buy. Your message to auction folks are let someone else buy him. So you have them right there with Stedman Bailey, who else? Philly Brown, Stevie Johnson. Talk to us about Percy Harvin.
Well, a lot of what Matt said, I echo that statement exactly. I mean, I don't have a lot of faith in Percy Harvin. He could move up to as high as what he finished last year, which was 58th. But for his career, he only averages 11 yards per catch. He comes with a lot of baggage. Rex Ryan's in Buffalo right now. The receiving corps he had in New York the last couple of years finished as a 30th ranked wide receiver. So we know that with Castle at quarterback or whoever plays quarterback there right now, it's not looking too pretty. So they're probably going to run the ball a ton. And, we know what Rex likes that part of the game too. So, I mean, he has locker room trouble. He has injury history. I just don't have a lot of faith in Percy doing a whole lot. He could have a couple big games, but I really don't. I mean, because he's still when you go to an auction and someone's going to be hoping that maybe just one last hurrah, or maybe they're going to get something really good out of him. If you gamble on him for $3, it's not the end of the world. I really can't see him going for much more than that when there's so many really good receivers, I feel, in the league, that you don't have to pay a lot of money on Percy Harvin. If you gamble on him for a couple bucks or whatever at the end of your auction and he pans out and has a nice season, that's great. But he's never had a 1,000-yard season, so he has a lot of negatives beside his name, and it outweighs the positives for me at this point.
Well, and Slim, I'm looking over at Fantasy Pros right now at the consensus rankings, and he's ranked a lot higher than what I thought he would, where he thought he would slot in. It's a low-end wide receiver 3, along the lines of Allen Robinson, Charles Johnson, Victor Cruz, Steve Smith. So Fantasy Pros has him slotted at wide receiver 37. What do you think of his positioning there?
I agree. I think it's a little bit high. I mean, a lot of those names you said, I would be more inclined to start one of those guys over Percy Harvin. And like the biggest thing you guys were talking about is, I mean, for me, I'm not a big believer, or I don't like the unknown, and I just don't know exactly how he's going to fit in with this offense quite yet. So if I'm going to take a flyer, I think there's higher upside flyers than him. I mean, we look at somebody like Robert Woods, what he did last year, and granted the offense is going to change, but he had 700 yards and I think 5 touchdowns, which to me that's Percy Harvin's ceiling. Now you bring in someone like Greg Roman, who isn't really known for creativity per se in terms of the passing game. So I just have a hard time finding where Percy's going to get all these targets, especially with a more talented wide receiver ahead of him on the depth chart. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit high. I personally think, he's around, wide receiver 50 or so, 55 range, kind of closer to guys like Kendall Wright and maybe somebody that we'll talk about a little bit later. We'll save that, though. So, yeah, I think it's a little bit high.
I'm going to just briefly pause here, Slim. Live tweet came in 17 minutes ago from our buddy at Chad_Canfield. He says, thanks at Slim for MVP for calling out Uncle Buckets for an inability to pull the trade trigger. # cold feet. # toying with my emotions. Was there a call out that I missed?
He's probably thinking of Saturday.
Okay. I don't know. It wasn't much of a call out, but we discussed it. It was okay. Anyways, Dynasty talk, Matt. We just started a Dynasty League last year with the guys we've been doing auction with the last few years, and
nice.
Pleasantly addicting. You do any Dynasty?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dynasty is really fun, incorporating the rookies and everything like that. Because, I mean, one of my favorite things is to evaluate draft prospects and all that. So getting to incorporate those and making, like, real GM sort of decisions is very fun. I enjoy it a lot.
We're coming up to our first rookie draft here, so
Cooper
you guys
White.
don't give me ideas. I found them.
Cooper White.
Oh, well, as a pure talent, I like White a little bit better, but situation I think is gonna dictate a lot of that. And I mean, those are two guys I've also written reception perception posts about, so you can check those out. The links to the Football Guys articles are on my website. But I like White a little bit more, but it's really close. They're both excellent prospects.
Yeah.
So I got the 102 and the 104. Okay, all right, good.
I'm Team White also. But
Team White. Yeah. Well, we'll go to a nice segue right into one of your former teammates. Well, I guess a 49er teammate. Michael Crabtree has signed with Oakland. He's crossed the bay. He's also on a one-year kind of prove-it deal. Matt, you've done some charting of Crabtree. What do you see there?
Oh yeah, Crabtree was one of the guys early on in the process that for collecting all the data for all these NFL wide receivers that I charted him because I knew he was about to leave in free agency, and I was really surprised by how good his numbers were, and so were a lot of other people. But yeah, so the thing about Crabtree is that obviously he's been hurt. I mean, he had that really bad Achilles injury, and he's had some other injuries, lower body ones in particular. So he's not a vertical threat at all anymore. His success rate versus coverage on 9 routes, which are the fly pattern, just straight down the field, win with speed, it was 34.4%, which is well below the NFL average that I have. So obviously he's not a guy who can get deep on you anymore. He doesn't make a lot of plays after the catch. However, his success rate on curl routes, slant routes, flat routes, comeback routes were all above average. So those are more shorter, intermediate sort of routes. And what I think is really surprising about Crabtree is just how good of a savvy route runner he's become as he's aged. And I think some receivers, it's obviously happened sooner for him than it has for other guys, but you see as a lot of receivers as they age, they have to sort of start adding technique and nuance into their route running in order to compensate for that lack of physical ability. And now that he's a lesser specimen than he was when he came into the league, I think he has compensated really well. So that's why he looks so good in his reception perception sample. However, he didn't produce statistically last year. It's a lot of S's. He didn't produce numbers-wise last year because his quarterback, Colin Kaepernick, was such a poor fit for him. Kaepernick is really like a see-it, throw-it quarterback. Like, he doesn't anticipate guys coming open. And then Anquan Bolden is really a perfect fit for that because, he catches anything regardless of whether he's covered or not. So it was just easy for Kaepernick to just lean on Bolden, and that chemistry that he had shown with Crabtree at one point faded away. So I know he didn't get a lot of interest in free agency, and that really isn't so surprising because he's kind of rumored to be kind of a headache at times. He's also he's got all the injury concerns. However, I think he still has game left in him. He's a guy that, like I said, he wins on those short intermediate routes. And if you look at Derek Carr's passing numbers last year, his yards per attempt was below 6. It was in, I think, the 5.5 range. I know Pro Football Focus has done a lot of work with how he wasn't a great deep passer last year. And they look like they kind of want to build that short passing game around Carr. So that seems like an ideal fit with Crabtree, to me at least. And while there were certainly better landing spots he could have gone to, I would have loved to see him in New Orleans or New England or even Minnesota. Would love that. However, I think he's going to get a lot of targets in Oakland in that short game, so he could be a sneaky PPR receiver who could be a sleeper.
All right. Hey, Blister, again, you updated your ranks about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. April 6th is when they were updated. So you don't have this move really slotted on there, but I saw that there might have been a last-minute entry way at the bottom of the wide receiver ranks, which then that's where you put Michael Crabtree. Where would you slot him right now? Because you have him as a 49er slotted a lot higher than down at the very bottom. It says Michael Crabtree, $1, Oakland.
He's actually, if you scroll up, he is on there.
As Oakland, though?
He's at 60. Yeah, 61.
He's at 61 with San Francisco.
That's changed to Oakland now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then, would you see way at the bottom?
Yeah, I saw that. I had him on there twice. I must have had him on there twice. I didn't see him at the bottom until you just said that. I was just looking at him where I had him right now, and I put on there, because where I have him right now, he was still with San Fran, so I changed it, and I said he has to be reevaluated. But I do like what Matt said there. Plus, last year, Carr attempted 599 passes, so they're not afraid to sling it. And if it is a short passing game, that could help them out a lot. I do think they really want to build up Latavius Murray this year. That's the hope for anybody that owns him in Dynasty, and that's kind of the thing going into the draft. If they can build around him, then the short passing game might really be effective. And I mean, Crabtree, if you look at that Oakland receivers over the years, they've all been pretty abysmal, so it wouldn't take much, I don't think, for him. I mean, James Jones had a better year last year than I expected coming over from Green Bay. We didn't expect him, obviously, to put up numbers like he was capable of with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, but he still did better than I expected. And I think Crabtree is probably, he's got a good chance there. I mean, the rest of those guys are a bunch of bums, if you ask me. So as long as he can play, stay healthy, he has a chance to have a decent season. I'd still let Slim or Zoobs draft him, but good luck to him.
Hey, Slim, speaking of other bums over there in Oakland, as personally, as an Andre Holmes owner, what does this do for someone like that who, people maybe were a little high on towards the end of the season? Does Crabtree help that or hurt that?
Well, I think he's going to hurt it. I mean, they can only roster so many receivers, and I have a feeling they're probably going to draft one or probably two, or maybe two. For sure, I think they're drafting one. So, and probably fairly high. So, I mean, he's going to make the team. Yeah, but I agree with, and this is what I was going to say when I read this article by Matt. This is kind of why, if you're out there listening to this, go and read these things, because it's going to either help you gain some knowledge you didn't have or reaffirm things that you already see. And as a Niners fan, these are kind of a lot of the things Matt talks about in this article are things that I've kind of felt all along, that Crabtree, he's not a deep threat anymore. The Niners misused him. He didn't have a good quarterback fit. The guy can run routes and get yards after the catch, so he's better suited for short yardage or shorter routes. He's got sticky hands. He catches a lot of poorly thrown balls in these shorter routes. So yeah, he's a great fit for Oakland. Like Blister said, I mean, you look at Carr, he threw 599 passes attempted. They're probably going to be losing a lot of games, which is going to have to open up the offense at some point. So Crabtree could be a beneficiary. And when I look at, not that I obviously we're an auction site, so we don't tend to go to ADP, but I'm looking at the ADP on say Fantasy Football Calculator. Crabtree's ADP right now is around the 15th round, where a guy we just talked about, Percy Harvin, is picked in the 9th. And, I mean, to me, they're more or less statistically this year can be very similar, these two guys. But for that much of a difference in price, I would take Crabtree because I think his ceiling can be higher.
Absolutely.
And, I'm going to get him for cheaper. It's showing me that right now. So the odds are, once we start mocking and starting our auction drafts, we're going to get him for a cheaper price than we are going to get players like Percy Harvin. And the whole goal of fantasy football is to find these guys we can get for cheap with higher ceilings. And to me, he's one of them, just based on things like Matt talked about, situation, the passing volume is here. Percy Harvin's not going to get volume. There's a lot of things that bode well for Crabtree this year. So, I mean, he's a guy you should be looking at late in your draft.
Well, and this is why we love having Matt on, and that's why you're going to love going through his stuff, because these are little gems you're going to find, right? You're going to say, oh, Crabtree's a bum. What has he done? Blah, blah, blah. Percy's got all this upside, but I love the idea of breaking it down and taking a look, and something like you were saying, situational, misused. As a Niner fan, you've seen it over the last few years. So I like the idea, Matt. Go RBs nice and early, spend your money up there, and then find these sneaky guys down a little bit lower.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of guys like that. I mean, the wide receiver position right now is such a glut of talent, especially after those guys from the rookies from last year came in and added, like 10 or 15 new players to the repertoire. I mean, there's a ton of really impressive guys coming off the rookie season last year, and now we've got more coming in this year. It's going to be another a pretty good wide receiver class. So it's such a glut of talent. You can get contributors anywhere pretty much late in your drafts or in the mid rounds.
Awesome. So here's an interesting situation. If we take a look next up at Andre Johnson, who signs a deal, 3-year, $21 million with Indy, and we like Andrew Luck throwing the football, Matt. Talk to us about his metrics and what you saw when he broke them down.
Yeah, so the thing about Andre Johnson is he gets criticized for being, quote-unquote, inefficient last year because he was one of the most highly targeted wide receivers in the league, but he also, I think he was targeted over 170 times and didn't catch near that many passes. So he gets criticized for being inefficient, but look at what was behind center with him. And I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick Fitzpatrick was the best option, and they wasted no time sending him right out the building this year. And then when he was hurt, he had the ghost of Case Keenum and Ryan Mallett, which, by the way, Ryan Mallett is a terrible quarterback, and don't let anybody trick you into thinking otherwise. But anyway, so and none of these guys were in there for a consistent stretch, so wasn't a lot of chemistry going on there. And DeAndre Hopkins obviously had a really good year last year. He was much more efficient in that offense. But this is the problem when you say inefficient, and you're just looking at it from a target or a catch to target perspective, because it doesn't really give you the context that I think some of my data does. As for Johnson, his success rate versus man coverage was above average, which is pretty impressive for a 34-year-old receiver. And his success against zone coverage was just right around average. He did fine against double coverage. He did fine against press coverage. So he's a guy who's still a really good player, in my opinion. And also, what he brings to the Colts is something they haven't had. It's a physical, a big guy that can win in traffic. Johnson was one of my best guys charted for contested catches. He had a 76.5 conversion rate. So that's really good. That's one of the better ones that I've charted. He's a guy who can, a lot like Crabtree. His success rate versus coverage on 9 routes was pretty low, but he wins on those comebacks, those short to intermediate, especially like on curl routes where he's just going to turn around and box out his guy. Uh-huh. Those are going to be some invaluable plays for Andrew Luck, because Reggie Wayne is obviously not coming back. I think he's pretty much done. I don't know if he officially retired or not, but he probably should. Yeah, a great career, but obviously wasn't a very good player last year. And then T.Y. Hilton is, he's a finesse, a speed receiver who's really he was more consistent last year than I thought he would be, but he's not a physical go up and get it in coverage type of guy. So I think Johnson is going to be a little underrated this year based on his number 2 role or whatever, but I think he's going to play a pretty big part of that passing game, and he could surprise some guys with a really strong season. And he's hungry. He wants it. After being pretty much jettisoned pretty unceremoniously by the only team he's ever played for, and a bad team at that. You look at some of the quarterbacks that he's played with throughout his career, and you feel for the guy, because he probably could have been a Hall of Famer otherwise. So maybe he's going to pad that resume a little bit for a couple of years with the Colts. I'm personally is another guy that I think is going to be under the radar. And I'm excited about.
All right. Blister, you've got him slotted right now as wide receiver 20. He sits in a tier looking with Brandon LaFell, Andre Johnson, Julian Edelman, Keenan Allen, Decker, Jarvis Landry, that kind of a zone. Talk to us about why you think he slots in there. It seems like a big separation in that tier from the Kelvin Benjamins, Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, well, last year I looked at his numbers. He had 85 grabs, 936 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, I think that if he improves on anything, he could get 90 grabs and he could get 9 touchdowns. So if he had 6 touchdowns and even 6 more grabs on it, that slots him up he would have scored at about 232, 235 points roughly, and that would have put him probably around 14th or 15th overall last year. And I think he could climb that high potentially because of the fact that he's got a good quarterback finally. But he's still got T.Y. Hilton there to contend with. They got a lot of weapons in there. If Duron Carter works out, there's some guys there that now they're going to have to. They're going to be a good offense, I think, and I think he's going to probably see, if anything, it's going to be an increase in touchdown catches, because he's going to get, he could get that 85 to 100 catches. 100 is probably going to be a little bit much with Ty there, but it's going to be in that category. And I think more so than anything, he's a big guy that might be found in the end zone when they're in the red zone. He'll be looked for maybe in the end zone once in a while. But I know Andrew Luck will use both of his tight ends still. So there's a lot of people kind of spread it around with. So just based on the numbers he put up last year, like we said, with the poor quarterback and building on that would have ranked him anyways at last year in that 15, 16 range, maybe 14. And if you look at the guys ahead of him, like these guys all could potentially put up more numbers because either they're the number 1, maybe there's not a lot going on for that offense. I just think that most of the guys ahead of him have a chance to stay ahead of him. But I do like the fact that he could be a really nice play, obviously a lot cheaper option in your auction because of the fact that there's a lot of big names out there right now, because of the fact that on his team is Ty still, and he had a really good year last year, put up 260 fantasy points. And so I think that guy's still going to probably bring money. You can get Andre Johnson for that price tag. You're going to probably be able to put up, you're going to be bordering on wide receiver 1 numbers, but definitely high-end wide receiver 2, and it's going to be a pretty solid buy for your money there. But one thing I also like to point out, because we do talk a little bit of dynasty from time to time, and he is getting a little bit older, 34 years old, right? And you look at what Reggie Wayne did as a 34-year-old there. He had 106 grabs, 1,355 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Pretty darn good numbers for a 34-year-old. So I know I got guys kicking tires trying to get Jordy Nelson off me this year because he's going to be 30, and they're giving me 2 guys potentially that combined for 160 points last year. And there's still years in these guys. I have, like, when you're looking at fantasy, just because he hits a fabulous number of 30 in dynasty doesn't mean you have to kick him to the curb. Nothing has changed for Jordy. He's still healthy. I mean, he's had injuries, but he's got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And you look at these samples where you guys kind of get a little bit hesitant when they start hitting 30, but they're not running backs, they're receivers.
Yeah, different receiver.
And he's in a good spot still. If Jordy Nelson would have been traded to Cleveland or somewhere, probably would have been happy to get rid of him. But, those are things like, I think just because, people aren't going to be thinking, like, Andre's a bit older, but I really think he's got a chance to put up great numbers, and you shouldn't shy away from that. And he's the guy you might pick up in a dynasty really cheap right now because people just look at that age. Yeah. But I think you got to be wary of what they can still do. And I think another guy like that, Calvin Johnson, he's getting up there, but I think he still has potential. But there is a time, right? You got to sell high, buy low.
Yeah. Well, it all depends, I guess, on your dynasty situation too, hey Slim. If you're rebuilding, like, team under construction, or if you're contending. I mean, the Colts signed him to a 3-year deal, so they think there's still a little tread left on the tires, hey?
Well, there's definitely some tread. I mean, just because he's 33, 34 years old doesn't mean he's going to be irrelevant. Of course not. I mean, he's not brought in there to take the top off a defense like he used to. Like I said, when he first went there, all I could think about was I can't wait to see him run slants with Andrew Luck throwing him the ball and being able to use that big frame like Matt talked about to box out corners and just – all he needs to do is break 1 tackle, which he's shown that he can do throughout his career. And now he's picking up, an extra 5-10 yards. So, I think the opportunity is going to be there. I'd look at similar guys points-wise, and I don't know. I feel like his floor is kind of around where we saw Sammy Watkins last year, 950 yards, around 70 balls, 6 touchdowns, something like that. And, I think there's only room for that to go up. I mean, if he starts approaching 80, 85 catches, maybe he gets close to double-digit touchdowns too and takes a little bit of the red zone looks away from the tight ends they got in Indy. Now he's probably a great value in your draft, and I think if you're drafting right now, maybe that value isn't there. But with these old guys, we often see, that shine will wear off of him going to a new team with a new offense, and people will still look at that age, and their opinions of him will start to drop, and we'll see his ADP go down and his auction value go down again. So hang in there. I mean, that's perfect for you. Keep him, stashed in your queue or whatever, and take advantage when you draft in August, because a lot of the owners in your leagues are probably going to be sleeping on him just because of that age number.
All right. Awesome stuff on Andre Johnson. Let's move on to our 5th wide receiver tonight. Let's take a look at Mike Wallace. He was traded to the Vikes. We have a big following out of Minneapolis with the fantasy football auction. So shout out to Minnesota, and hopefully, Blister, we get ourselves down to a game and watch Mr. Wallace play this year. Is that the plan? Is he sleeping? Is he there?
Probably muted.
He probably muted.
Yep.
That never happens.
He's muted. Anyway.
Did you know that?
Wait, he's going to fall off a chair. Hold on. Yeah.
No, I looked at the schedule. Our best bets down there are probably the 20th against the Lions or the 27th against the Chargers. Philip
Ooh.
Rivers and company. Wouldn't that be
Oh,
something to
good.
go
We should
see?
send you to a
If Philip
Chargers
Rivers
game.
is still there,
Yeah, this is true.
all that talk about
Yeah,
him maybe getting traded.
Yeah, we've been bad-mouthing him and the Chargers for about 3 years.
We should
Maybe
get
it would be
you there,
fitting that we
Mr.
go down
Dolan.
and watch them.
That would be pretty
There you
good.
go.
Anyways, talking about the Vikings, Matt, talk to us about Mike Wallace, sorry, and what do you see out of his charts?
Wallace is such a difficult case to crack. Not only what happened with him in Miami, but also how to project him in Minnesota now. I'll talk about him in Miami a little bit first. There's always that big back and forth about, was it Ryan Tannehill's fault or was it Mike Wallace's fault that you saw them? I mean, God, at least 2 times a game you see them have one of those miscommunications on deep passes. And I mean, just again and again, it was a constant theme throughout his 2 years there. So, and I ended up, the title of the article on Backyard Banter is Expectations and an Odd Coupling Doomed Mike Wallace in Miami. And so, yeah, I really think that the contract that they signed him to was really just a mistake from the start. He wasn't worth that kind of money, and it kind of put those unfair expectations on him because he is a limited player. I mean, you look at his route chart. Obviously, the majority of them are 9 routes. Again, just the vertical, straight down the field routes. And so then other than that, it's mostly just post, curls, and slants, which you expect to see that from a rookie wide receiver, an inexperienced player, not a guy who's been in the league for a while. So they gave all that money to a limited player and kind of expected him to be a number 1 receiver, which was a mistake. And then Ryan Tannehill is not really a guy he's not a good deep passer. I mean, that's just kind of the bottom line. But Wallace also, he had some inefficiencies tracking the ball and really winning the ball in coverage. He was pretty inconsistent at that. So it's partly to blame. It's kind of, when a couple breaks up and it's both of your faults. You were both cheating on each other. It's sort of one of those deals. We've all been there. But anyways, that's a topic for another show. Back on. Yeah, right. Back on Wallace. So he really was just kind of set up to fail in Miami. So it's no surprise that they ended up parting ways. As far as his success rate versus coverage, he's right around average for beating man. He's better against zone, which you expect from a fast player. Now projecting him to Minnesota. Obviously, Norv Turner's a great offensive coordinator, and they've got a nice young quarterback there in Teddy Bridgewater. I've been a fan of Bridgewater for a long time now, so I'm excited that he had a pretty good rookie year, and he's got some weapons there now. I think Turner's good at getting the deep game involved, and he's good with these fast down-the-sideline players like Wallace. However, I don't really know that Bridgewater is a great deep passer either. But I think where he's going to have more value than you'd expect is Wallace is there were a lot of times in Miami where he'd come back on a curl route when you're deep threat you get a lot of cushion. Yeah. So you see him come back on a curl route, but Tannehill would just miss that. He wouldn't see it. He wouldn't anticipate that happening. Where Bridgewater is already one of the best anticipatory quarterbacks in the league. So I think he's going to make a lot more of those sort of plays for Wallace available than Tannehill was. I just question whether he's going to be able to take the top off the defense. Also, there's a lot of pretty interesting receivers there. I've still got some faint hope for Cordero Patterson. Yeah. Also, I like what I saw out of Charles Johnson last year. And obviously, if Adrian Peterson comes back, there'll be a run-based attack. So I don't really know what the volume is going to look like for Wallace, but I do think he's in a better situation now than he was in Miami.
Blister, do you think he's better because he's with Norv Turner? We know you're a huge Norv Turner fan.
Well, I don't think he's necessarily better. I'm a little nervous about his attitude. I'm not as worried about Bridgewater getting acclimated to the NFL in his second year. I'm more worried about Wallace getting ready for the Minnesota snowstorms that could happen in October and run for the rest of his home games. Maybe 6 home games. Yeah. He could disappear. Right. I think he did play in Pittsburgh. They can have some cooler weather, but it's not Minnesota. But I think he's a guy that every year, like I was looking at shopping him the other day, and in PPR, every year he's scored between just under 199 up to 245 fantasy points. And last year, 245 would have put him in around 13th overall. But last year he was close to just right around 200. And I think he can still probably do that. I think he could be good for, close to 1,000 yards hopefully, and he's had a knack for finding the end zone. Even last year wasn't even that exciting year, and he still got in the end zone 8 times. I'm looking at the wrong one. 10 times. That's what I thought. So I think that it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, with that running game, if AP comes back or not, and if they have to start thinking about him more so, because that would open up some more space for Wallace. It'll be an interesting play this year. I'm a little nervous about him yet.
Slim, what do you think? Right now, Blisters has him right around the wide receiver 30. Fantasy Pros has him consensus ranked around there too. Do you think he's that mid wide receiver 3, or where do you see his floor and ceiling?
Yeah, I guess I feel like, I'm kind of maybe in the same boat as you guys. I have a hard time slotting him anywhere right now. He's just one of these guys. It's just tough to. I want to think that this change will be good for him. I remember a couple of games as a Mike Wallace owner from way back when he was in Pittsburgh, and they're just burned in my memory of screen passes that they would throw to Wallace where he would make one guy miss and he's gone for 40 yards into the end zone. And like Matt was saying, that wasn't Miami's repertoire with him. They, tried to take the top off of defense. It was a low percentage play because Tannehill, he can't complete a deep pass. So I'm hoping that Norv kind of goes back to that. Let's get him the ball in space a little bit. Some short passes for Teddy, where there's timing involved. But you look at some of the games. I think he's always going to be one of those guys where he's going to have one great game for you, follow it up with a mediocre at best game for 2 weeks, and then come back and kind of in a light of Deshaun Jackson a little bit. I think it'll be hard for him to match those 10 touchdowns he got last year, which hurts his value a little bit. Taking all that into account, I think it's a safe play to have him kind of around wide receiver 30 in that range as, a low-end wide receiver 3. I wish I could be more definitive. I just have a hard time because I don't really know where to peg him yet. And I think that's just kind of what's transpired the last couple of years of his career. He hasn't given us much to consistency for us to be able to kind of foresee what's going to happen with this change of scenery.
So, Slim, we haven't done it yet. Let's play a little name game.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, I know. Well, and just because, no, but I think it's good because this is the type of thing that you should do, right? Like, would I take him or him? Yeah. Him or him? And then that's where you kind of figure out where you slot him. Let's see, Mike Wallace or Terrence Williams?
Wallace.
Wallace.
All right, nice. Yeah, chime in.
I'm not a big Williams fan. You know that.
Wallace or V-Jax?
I'm going to go V-Jax, but it's slight.
All right.
I'm probably regret that. I actually don't mind Steve Smith this year, so I'm going to give the edge to Steve.
Okay. Fitz? No one else. Larry Fitz? Sorry, Matt, what was that?
I said they have no one else to catch passes in Baltimore right now.
That's exactly why.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I'd probably rather have Wallace over Fitzgerald.
How about Torrey Smith, speaking of Baltimore?
Wallace. Come on. Right. I hate Torrey Smith.
So, hey, if we got those, I'm just kind of working through Blister's ranks there. So, yeah, you've got him in that tier of mid-range wide receiver 3.
What do you think, Matt? Agree, disagree? It's such a crappy spot, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. I just
who
don't
wants
know
to draft a mid wide receiver 3? Nobody.
All right.
Nobody wants a mid wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think you're going to be if those are the guys you have on your team, you're going to be playing matchups pretty much, exclusively. When one of those guys goes against, the bad secondary, you put them in. But a lot of those guys are going to be inconsistent all over the map. You're not sure volume wise. Especially Torrey Smith, and in San Francisco now. It's not a good landing spot.
All right, so Matt, just while we kind of have you on here, we were going to go through 5 receivers, make it pretty easy. There's been so many moves we could speak for hours, but while we have you on here, and you were talking earlier, I think maybe when we're off there, that you, and I mentioned maybe while we're on, that you really like taking a look at the draft class. three of us, unfortunately or fortunately, play against each other in a dynasty, and our first big rookie draft is coming up. We all know the top tier guys, but who are some sleepers that you've charted that we should be paying attention to? Maybe in the second, third roundish type of rookie draft.
Yeah, now you're talking. I love this, especially this time of year.
There we go.
Yes. I just put up my wide receiver rankings on the Backyard Banter.
Oh, did you?
Last week.
I'm going to pull them up right now.
Yeah, I didn't really. Last year I tried to evaluate a full draft class, and I just decided, like you said, really getting into the niche. I think the wide receiver position is obviously my niche. So I basically just did that. That's the only position that I fully ranked. I got about 35 guys fully evaluated this year. Not all of them have reception perception data because it's hard to get college film like it is. NFL is readily available. Yeah. And you really do need like the all 22 angle to chart all the routes and everything like that. Otherwise, you just end up guessing off TV copy, which I don't want to guess. I want to be right.
Right.
But yeah. So, anyways, a couple guys I really like. I don't know if this really qualifies as a sleeper because he's gotten a lot of hype from big media draft. But Devin Smith is a guy I'm totally smitten with. He really didn't have a ton of production at Ohio State, but that's really just because. They primarily used him just as a deep threat. And by the way, he's one of the best deep threats I've ever scouted. I mean, I have a reception perception. I did have reception perception for him, and I talked about success rate versus coverage on 9 routes, and some of these guys, like, pretty good NFL numbers are like in the 50-60 range. Really good NFL numbers are like in the 70 range. This guy, Devin Smith, had 90.5 success rate versus coverage on 9 routes. So you can see he's really fast. He gets on top of defense. Yeah, he definitely does. But also he has a contested catch conversion rate that's really positive, so he's good in traffic. He tracks the ball second to none in this draft class. I mean, he's got a lot of really intriguing skills. I mean, he's like a deep game artist. Watching him play in the deep section of the field is really like watching an artist paint a picture.
Blister, I don't know. Do you have a pad of paper out right now? Oh, you're right now taking notes, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure you guys know Matt Waldman. He's one of my football guys colleagues.
Yeah.
He does these RSP film rooms where we get to go in and watch him break down a prospect with a guest. I've been on 2 of them. The one I just recently was on, we watched Devin Smith together. And when you really take a close look at Smith, you see that he has a lot of potential as an underneath route runner, as a timing-based player. A lot of nuances in his route indicate that he can be a complete receiver. So I think day one you're getting a really good vertical threat, which is, hey, that's kind of valuable. That's important.
For sure.
But I think down the line you're going to see him develop into more of a complete player. So he's one of my favorite guys in this draft class. I have him right around the 6th spot. So I mean, he's not one of my top guys, but
I'm
as a
surprised when we looked through, because we were asking you about Whiter, Amari Cooper, and you've got Dorial Green-Beckham as your number 1 wide receiver on your rankings right now.
Yeah, I do. Green Beckham, obviously there's the off-the-field issues, which I don't take into account in my evaluations because I don't really have the glut of information that NFL teams will have on these guys. So I don't think, if I was a GM, I wouldn't take Green Beckham first off the board. I would probably take White or Cooper, and I prefer White. We talked about this before we came on the air. But Green Beckham is by far the best specimen out of the guys, and he also is a little bit more. Again, I like to think that reception perception is kind of a wide receiver myth buster, and one of the things when I charted him for the methodology was that he runs a lot more routes than he's given credit for. He's not as raw. He's a raw player, but that's because he's coming out of college, and he missed it. He took a year off, but was not allowed to play for a year.
Right.
And so he's not raw more so than the other prospects. They're all they all have not been in the NFL. They all have a lot to work on, but I think he has the highest potential out of everybody. But obviously, there's a lot of risk given what he's done in his past and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, he's my number 1 guy based purely just on on-field ability and talent.
Okay, throw us another late guy. So you got Devin Smith. What else you got?
Okay, this is another guy that I'm a lot higher on than pretty much a lot of my peers. Although there are some guys that I know in the industry who are in this guy's corner, and that's Devontae Davis out of UNLV, a guy that you can get in the.
Don't talk
Love
about
him.
the right thing. Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah.
there it goes. There goes my sticker.
And he's gone in the first round.
Yeah, so Davis is a guy that I did some work with preseason coming into this year, and I'm like, oh man, this guy is 6'3", 220. I mean, rocked out frame, looks like T.O. And he plays big. I mean, he had some injuries this year, which is why he didn't get to kind of build on what was a really strong 2013 season. But I mean, Davis has all the tools. He's like an undeniable contested catch player. He really, again, another guy that makes the physical plays. You can throw him the ball and he's going to win it no matter who is covering him. However, I think he's got all of his flaws are really correctable things. I mean, they're another guy that doesn't run the complete route tree, needs to work on his timing in and out of breaks and everything. But when he manages those, when he gets with a good wide receiver coach, I mean, he's got a lot of potential. This is a guy that I think you're going to see get drafted on day 3 in the NFL draft. But in a few years, you hold on to him on your bench in a dynasty league, and I think you're going to be rewarded. If everything plays out well for him.
Guys, why do I have a feeling we need to bring Matt on after the draft? Like after the rookie draft. I think all of a sudden, it makes he's seeing things out there that that's good, and you don't have to sit there and watch the film on him over and over and over again because Matt's done all that and charted it all. Blister, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I don't draft until the 3rd round of our rookie draft, so Matt, you might be FaceTimed in at about that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, that's what I'm here for.
Blister, I've got a couple high picks if you want to throw some big names at me,
give me some of those good deals you give everybody else, where you give away all your good players.
I know. I learned. That's why I'm team under construction. I'm learning. You know why, Blister? Because Blister, I've only played in leagues where there's trading, and that's with you, and I'm not really permitted to do much of that. So
you're so excited to trade.
This is my learning curve. and it stung me. Trust me. That's why my team's called under construction, Matt. If I told you what my team looked like after the draft, it's heartbreaking that I have this 2nd overall pick. Yeah. Anyways, Matt, it's been awesome having you on. We're like at the hour mark here, so we'll call it a day. It's been awesome having you on. Tell the listeners where they can find you. Twitter, all that type of stuff.
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. You can find pretty much, I write for a lot of different places, but any reception perception article that I put up, I will link it from Backyard Banter and put a little preview. So you can, any reception perception content you want, you can find that on thebackyardbanter.com. And what I'm doing with reception perception right now is I'm charting pretty much every NFL wide receiver to build some context, to build a database, and once I have that, I'll be releasing a book in July, and it'll basically be right in time for fantasy season, which is what we're all working for here. And this is the first year I'm doing this, so in the first year I will be giving the book away for free. And it's going to be well worth your $0. I mean, believe me. I think that just as a marketing standpoint, I think that I want to prove it to people first, because I know in future years when I do this book again and again and again, every year, people will come back. I mean, I know that. I mean, the data is good, and it's proven for me to be a really good learning tool at the very least. So yeah, be on the lookout for that, and I'll be obviously tweeting about it and everything. It's a fun project, and it's something that has taught me a lot, and I think it's a useful tool that everybody should check out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess before we sign off, too, just as a reminder to everybody, we've had a few guys emailing us directly to let us know. Head on over to iTunes. Subscribe to the podcast, give a comment, and as we move into our new premium subscription site, everyone who leaves a comment is going to get a free subscription. So there it is again. Like Matt said, giving away free content, basically just trying to prove it as well. I've got yet again another text from the app guy. We're working on it. The demo's coming to my email tonight, he said. So we've got the in-auction fantasy football auction draft app on its way too. So we've got a lot of stuff moving with us. The easiest way to follow us on Twitter is at Fantasy Auction. Slim holds the reins to that Twitter handle, right, Slim?
Among others, but yeah.
Yeah, well, do you hold those reins? And then Blister, as always, is Mr. Blister with no E. There's a common thing, and I am at Uncle Buckets, 2 T's on that one. Head on over to our website, too. Check things out. Slim's got his mock NFL draft rolling. It's on Walter Football. We're getting a lot of kickback from there. So it's thefantasyfootballauction.com. Listen to the pods. Blister is going to update his rankings hopefully soon so that he doesn't have 2 Michael Crabtrees on there. And I don't know. That's all I got for episode 106, boys.
Big thanks to Matt for coming on. Appreciate all your awesome insight, Matt, and hope the listeners there will probably, hopefully, you'll pick up a few more followers and buyers of the book and everything else, because that's awesome work you did there, or are doing, I should say.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt, and we'll keep in contact after this, and if the timing's right for you, I know you're a busy guy writing for everybody, and I see you more and more pods. You go over to the Backyard Banter site, you can see he's on all these podcasts too. So if we can slot you into the schedule, and if we didn't completely blow this tonight,
no,
we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Just let me know, and we'll make it work. This was fun, so I'll be happy to do it again.
Okay, excellent. So I guess we'll see Matt back on the podcast. Slim, I got the jerseys all set up, so I guess I'll see you when the soccer jerseys and all that type of stuff. Blister, I don't know. I'm going to see you because the Red Wings are going to win the series. And for the rest of you, I'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.